Look at that. That's looking pretty naughty.
And at 4K, there it is, 150 frames a second. This is the one I have been waiting ages for, because what we have here is the ultimate Micro ATX form factor gaming PC. And that in itself might not sound that interesting to you. You might be like, why does that matter? Because I have finally found the Micro ATX case of my dreams. This thing not only looks incredible, but it's very small, it's inexpensive, but you should be able to put in here pretty much any bit of kit that takes your fancy, but more on that in a bit. In this video, we're going to take you through all of the parts that feature in this build, including the brand new RTX 3080 graphics card. We're going to show you how easy it is to put together, which I'm hoping is going to be pretty straightforward, and of course show you the benchmarks to show you exactly how this PC performs in the latest titles. So if you do want to follow along at home, you know exactly what to expect and of course how to put it together. The build starts with our graphics card. This is the brand new RTX 3080. If you're wondering which one to go for, I don't have any particular allegiance at the moment. The one we're using here is the Gaming X Trio from MSI. It's a great graphics card, and my favorite thing about it is that it looks good and runs very quietly. But you can save yourself some money and get the Asus Tough Edition. Get subscribed if you want to see a build with that, by the way. That's coming next week. Or of course the Founders Edition, which is a very good card. It's not quite as fast as the AIB cards, but if you really love that Founders Edition design, then I wouldn't blame you for going that, especially if you can get it for a very good price. The platform that we're going for is AMD. This is the B550M mortar. We're using this because it is a Micro ATX motherboard, and for gaming there's not really that much point in going for X570 at the moment. It's got all the features you need and importantly supports PCIe Generation 4 for both the graphics card and the storage, which does bring us on very neatly to the SSD. This is from Patriot Gaming. It is the Viper VP 4100, catchy name, but the thing that's so impressive about this is that it's just got insane read and write speeds. There is a lot of exciting stuff going on at the moment with gaming and storage, so this is definitely a case of watch this space, and if you can afford to go for Gen 4, it is what I would recommend to get yourself as future-proofed as possible. The processor that we're using is a Ryzen 7 3700X, and obviously there are more powerful CPUs you can go for, but for a gaming PC, I wouldn't really recommend that you spend more money on the CPU unless you know you're going to be playing at really high frame rates. In terms of the cooling that we're using, this is a brand new one from Corsair. They've sent this out. It is the iQ H100i Elite Capellix. God, Corsair and their names, when will they learn? But this is really exciting actually because it is an entirely new, clean design. It looks awesome. And you do get ML RGB fans as standard. So you're not only getting something that looks good, but it is going to perform very, very well. This is of course a liquid all-in-one cooler, gives us some room for overclocking as well. We are also using an additional fan. This is another ML120, and this is going to go at the rear of our case. The memory that we're using, this is a really safe bet actually. It is some Crucial Ballistics RGB. Here we have 16 gigabytes of the stuff. You can get various different speeds. This one is 3600 megahertz, which is a perfect pairing for Ryzen. It's not that much more expensive. It runs very well, it looks awesome, and it is actually quite low profile, which makes it very compatible with a wide variety of coolers. Now, power supplies are an interesting one, and I've used quite a few with various different 3080s, and I've not run into any problems, even with a 650 watt power supply. However, that doesn't make it a sensible choice. Grabbing something with a little bit of room to spare, like this RM850, is probably going to be the most sensible thing. This is fully modular, so we can use custom cables, just like we are in this rig, just to make it a little bit more fancy, but obviously you don't need to do that. It's not the most interesting thing in the world, but it's going to do the job, and I've used Corsair power supplies for years and never had any issues. Which very nicely and neatly brings us on to the star of our show, the Micro ATX case. This is the MB320L from Cooler Master. Getting started with any PC build, you do of course want to grab your motherboard out of the box and then lay it on top of the box. You can see our Micro ATX B550 motherboard is a fair bit smaller than standard ATX. You typically just lose a little bit at the bottom, which doesn't make much difference to most people. It used to make SLI a little bit tight in terms of airflow, but you're not going to be doing that these days, so it's really not a problem. Open up our CPU socket with a lever, find the little gold arrow and line it up with the one on the motherboard, and then just drop that down without any force. RAM is up next, and these are the easiest things to install. Just make sure you're using slots 4 and slots 2. Line up the RAM notch with the one on the motherboard, push it down till it clicks, and then do the same with the other one. Then grab your smaller sized screwdriver for the PCIe SSD,
and then remove the screws and the heat shield. Note that there is a little plastic strip at the back that you're going to want to peel off to make good contact with our SSD. But in this instance, we actually need to go without the cover at all because there's a heatsink already on the top of this. So simply grab your SSD, insert it into the slot, and then push that down. Then just use an M.2 screw and screw it down into place. You should end up with something that looks like this. But this does bring me on to something very important, which is that you need to put your graphics card in this slot, as you'd probably expect. But if you're using Generation 4, you do also need to use this particular M.2 slot, and this is how you're going to get Gen 4 on both of those two devices. Otherwise, you'll probably run into problems where you're only getting Gen 3 on the SSD, which would be bad. I mean, I say it's bad, you probably wouldn't even notice. That's the reality of it, which is why it's important to check now and get it right. We can, of course, now actually start to put this inside our case. So we want to take all of these side panels off, which are ridiculously tight because Cooler Master hate me. Do you even undo screws that have been factory fitted, bro? If you haven't already inserted your IO shield, get that in now, but this one is nicely already put in place for us. Then just screw the motherboard down into place. And then here you can see just why I'm so excited about this. Look at the clearance you've got at the top there if you want to put a radiator or something. Like, this is just a big case made small. That might sound a little bit stupid, but I think you can see what I mean. This is exactly what I've been waiting for years and years to see. This is excellent so far. I'm going to plug in all of the front panel connections and fans and things now, as this should make it a little bit easier to cable manage. With all of that plugged in and out of the way, it's now time to actually install our CPU cooler. And I'm going to give you a little bit of advice here, which is that unless you're specifically wanting to overclock the CPU as far as it will go, I would strongly advise that you do actually put the CPU cooler at the top, because I've done it wrong so many times, and all that happens is that you get hot air coming in and being fed to the GPU if you put it at the front. But then the double whammy is that even if your CPU is not really doing anything, that radiator is then blocking airflow to your graphics card. The branding has changed slightly. Now we've got the sail logo on the top, and we've got this new pump design. Looks pretty cool. It's a little bit bigger than the ones before by the looks of it. But importantly, we do now get this new sort of RGB fan controller hub type thing. This is basically just a Commander Pro, isn't it? It takes loads of fans, loads of RGB, hooks it up to your PC over USB, and requires SATA power. When you're screwing in the fans, it's very important to make sure that you've got the direction of the airflow correct. Here we're pushing through the radiator and out of the case, but also that the cables are the correct way, as there has been so many times I've done all of this and then had to take it all apart and start again just because the fan cables are coming out towards me. There is thermal paste pre-applied on this, so make sure that you don't sort of start mucking this all over your PC, as you'll have a sad CPU and a sad PC case. Sad as in it will be covered in CPU paste, if that wasn't clear. It may well be easier at this stage to actually lie your case down flat and screw it in. That should now look a whole lot better. There is our radiator mounted at the top. We should have our RGB shining through. We grab our pump and then just screw this little AMD hook into place. It does look like we're gonna have to do a tiny bit of screwing. I'm sorry guys, that is not what I intended, but it's just what happened. It's funny because when I say these things, I genuinely don't think about how they sound. I mean, it's just weird. Don't forget that there are a couple of cables to plug in that actually come with the pump itself. You have the one that goes to the junction box for all of the control. And then you have this horrific thing, which is just a tiny, tiny little cable, which is essentially like a dummy fan header. It's just to go on the top of the motherboard just to tell the CPU that there is something actually plugged in, but this is just gonna break so easily. I mean, I know why it's like this, but Corsair, that's bad. Onwards and upwards. Anyway, let's put the power supply in next. It's always a whole lot easier if you plug the cables in before you actually put this in your case. Remember that this graphics card is going to need 3 8-pin power connections, which is a lot. So just plop this down into the basement. There is actually a little bit of an issue with clearance when it comes to this hard drive cage, but we're not using it anyway, and it is just catching as we put it in. I don't think it would be a problem to put it back if you were using a hard drive. Small annoyance aside, you can just plug in your power supply and all of its cables as if it was a normal PC, nothing really different about Micro ATX. Which means we can now move on to our graphics card. Ho, 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 here we go. Look at the size of this, and it's gonna fit in our case like nobody's business. That's not really the right phrase, is it? Point is, it will fit. We just need to remove some slot covers, which frankly is a bit cheap and nasty on this case. Almost forgot about our extra fan there for a second. Just feed all of these PCIe cables through so that we can actually get to that graphics card. That looks pretty nice and tidy, doesn't it? Which then finally leads us on to my least favorite bit of the build, which is to actually get all of these fans from the RGB system in place. And it's a bit of a ball ache, to be honest. Grab your little junction box. As I say, this connects with a SATA port. The other end then goes to a USB header on your motherboard. But otherwise, it's pretty straightforward, really. Just plug that pump in to the connection at the top. Is it reversible? Don't know, it might be. No, I can probably just put this on now and it will go on without any real resistance, which in my book is a success. Spoiler alert, when I say I'll tidy this up later with these builds, unless it's my own, I never do. Moment of truth time then. It's burst into life. We've got loads of color. Look at that. That's looking pretty naughty. RGB fans all over the shop, all spinning. Big question though, are we gonna get a display? Hey, there we go, that is what we like to see. As always, you will need a copy of Windows on a USB flash drive. You can download this from the Windows website. It's free, you will need a license key at some point, but you can do this in the meantime. Once you've plopped it in your PC, you can then load into the Windows installation tool and just follow the instructions really, and then you can start playing your games. The only thing really that strikes me is that because we do have this basement right at the bottom, while it does look very neat and tidy, the graphics card is going to be a little bit restricted with the air that it's getting. We do have the fan on the front that is directly blowing on it, so that's good. But actually, the Founders Edition in this case might make more sense, as it will sort of move the airflow up and out, rather than this, which is going to be blowing it into a very small gap. So that's probably what I'd recommend at this stage, but let's wait and have a look at the benchmarks. Here we are then, and oh my word, does Horizon Zero Dawn look incredible. This is proper true 4K. We're currently running at, what's that, 73 frames a second. The system is remarkably quiet. I've tuned all of the fans. Obviously the side panel is off at the moment, but we'll be testing it with it on in just a second. Lower down the resolution to 1440p and you can now see we're getting over 100 frames a second. It does of course feel that whole lot smoother as well. Don't forget that this is running at max ultimate settings, so you could lower that down as well. I've put the side panel on now to give this a little bit more of a realistic test as we fire up Apex Legends. So this is max settings and I've increased the FOV to 90 and you can see we're getting well over 100 frames a second here at 4K. So now you can finally have your cake and eat it when it comes to competitive gameplay that not only feels incredible, but looks great too. Oh, we got someone. I don't have any armor or guns. Oh no. Awaiting recovery, that's the story of my life. Damn, that load speed though. PCIe SSD, here we are in Doom Eternal, and at 4K, there it is, 150 frames a second. Absolutely mind-blowing. It's amazing. This is so cool. This is so cool. Here we are then in Fortnite and we're now running with DLSS, 4K, GeForce Experience running, and I'm telling you, this looks phenomenal. The only thing I'm not a fan of is it does seem that Fortnite for some reason does get a little bit of stutter when recording with GeForce Experience. If you're finding at this stage that your PC is making quite a lot of noise like I was, I first thought it was the graphics card, but it was actually all of those ML fans. So I've set a custom curve profile in iQOO and that has solved that issue. Something to note. Our final game then to test is the one that I simply love, Planet Zoo, and here you can see we're getting around about, what's that, 70 frames a second at absolute ultra settings, and this game is actually incredibly difficult to run. You might laugh, but when you actually have a closer look at some of the models here and just how impressive the whole game looks, I think you can understand. I know I've said this before and I'm probably being a bit boring, but look how cute the baby elephant is. Look at him, he's so small. And so then, here we have our ultimate Micro ATX gaming PC, and I love it. The only thing is, there is a little bit of restriction with the GPU in terms of the way it breathes. There's not that much of an air gap there, but so far I haven't actually run into any problems. This is running full pelt in the background and the fans haven't really come on. Sorry to interrupt, but it does actually look like we developed an issue a day after I actually filmed this entire video. As you can see, the CPU cooler is flashing red, and that means help, because it seems that the pump seems to have developed a weird issue. The good news is that it does tell you this has happened. The bad news is obviously that it's happened. I am going to shut down the computer before the CPU overheats. It really is a very weird issue. I spoke to Corsair and they've said that they've had absolutely no report of any issues with these. So they're going to take a look at mine and actually see what went wrong. So I wouldn't worry about this because it's clearly just almost like a freak accident, I guess. I felt as if I needed to put this in the video because happened it has. But yeah, go back to the video and enjoy me with flat hair.
But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think that this is the perfect Micro ATX case? Would you prefer to have a slightly different design, maybe something like that 2 ATX? All round though, I think what Cooler Master have done is fantastic, and I think this is a fully packed package that is pretty much no compromise, to be honest. Maybe just a filter for the front and a couple of cable grommets, but nothing really that would concern me. I really hope you've enjoyed this video though. Please smash that like button if you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to check out the Amazon affiliate links if you want to learn more about any of these parts featured down in that description below. Get subscribed if you want to see more PC builds. If you want to see a full-sized 3080, you can find that in the end screen, or stay tuned for the very special Tough edition that we're doing next week. But in the meantime, smash that like button, as I say, leave your comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.